after the final shape, we did see, interestingly, obviously everyone's always wondering what's going to happen after the witness has done what it wants to do, or just after the final shape expansion in general. But Bungie devs, in an interview, you've probably seen it, talked a lot about the Vex, and pretty said quite obviously how we're going to hear more about the Vex after this chapter is done. And they even said, I'm paraphrasing, but pretty much that the Vex are like watching two gods battle it out, and then they're going to wait for one to win, and then they're going to do their thing. But the Vex definitely seem like Bungie's escape plan, because obviously they've got time traveling, they've got that pretty much cop out of like most storytelling, especially like the Marvel Avengers, of let's just use alternate timelines because it's a good way. If people die, we can just bring them back from other timelines, or if the witness ends all life in the universe, we can just use the Vex and imagine a simulation or an alternate timeline where we're still alive, or where we beat the witness, or maybe the witness doesn't even come, and maybe we go back to like a pre-Destiny 1, or just an alternate timeline in general. But the Bungie, they probably, I would imagine Bungie aren't too happy about. I think they probably said a bit too much. But they said very obviously that the Vex are quiet for a reason. Expect to hear more of them after this season. And it also makes sense because we've seen the three other races, the Fallen, Cabal, and Hive, are very just understandable, and they've all chosen sides. You've got the good Cabal and the bad, the good Hive and the bad, the good Fallen and the bad. But the Vex were always separate, just robots. So when all the other races have kind of aligned with good or bad, and they've all just been kind of, the dust has settled, the Vex are always that kind of just wild card. So it does make sense that I would imagine the story is going to continue with them. But they're also just kind of very emotionless robots, so they're not the most compelling villain. But I do also think at the same time, because they're quiet and mysterious, it does make them cool. Like they were, of course, the original villain of Destiny, of the Vault of Glass. They were the kind of the main... When we first saw Destiny, they were the Atheon and the Vault of Glass, where they were the toughest enemies. So they definitely hinted that the Vex are going to be a big part of the future of after Final Shape.
I think also it's worth remembering that when it comes to the Vex, there is a well of potential there. Because, yeah, as you say, they feel very underdeveloped, but I think there's also the potential for endless possibility there, because you have this well of intelligence that spans literal planetary networks. It's so huge that it breaks through time, and they have installations out there beyond our reach, far out in the stars, such as Volantis 2082, which is literally an entire star that they've captured and just built a massive station around to effectively create infinite materials. They've been feeding this thing extra resources so that it can keep functioning beyond its natural expiry date. And when you sit there and you realize that's the intelligence we're dealing with, suddenly you sit there and you start to think, okay, so what if a single mind emerges dominant from all of this? What does that look like? You know, are we suddenly looking at sort of a sovereign over the Reapers kind of situation from Mass Effect 3? Are we looking at something kind of like Skynet, you know? Is there an ulterior purpose to it? Can we even understand this thing? And when you also think about the fact that it can calculate time and the future and different realities that it's capable of simulating, all of a sudden the Vex become this really terrifying threat again, especially when one of the bigger chess pieces moves off the board and creates that power vacuum. So, yeah, it's a totally logical direction to go. I also don't think it's the only one, though, you know? Like, there's a ton of story that we can still sit there and tell inside of Destiny that is compelling enough. Like, you know, if we are going to step outside the bounds of the Sol system alone, I think there's a very obvious call between the Cabal and the Hive, which is that if Xivu Arath survives the final shape, you know, we're probably going to be sitting there seeing the Cabal of Keitel's collective remaining forces trying to retake Torobatl, probably with us at their backs, as a big alliance move, you know? We will probably have that being a massive pitched war between the Hive and the Cabal, which we will take part in. And in itself, I mean, you know, you throw the idea of a liberation campaign on top of everything, and suddenly it's like, oh yeah, this is a big deal. All of a sudden it makes a whole ton of sense why this would be a cool storyline to go down. Or you could just honestly pull out any number of the weird little things that Destiny has waiting in the back ends of its plot.
A lot.
You know, I mean, Mara still has an Ahamkara egg that's taken somewhere in the back of her court. Do we know if that's going to hatch? Do we know what will hatch if it does? Is it corrupted? Is there something she can do with it? We don't know. By the way, what are the Aphelion? The Aphelion are something that's out there in the universe that are a weird anonymous threat that nobody seems to really know about. We've no idea how big a deal it is, but they seem to kill everything that comes across them, and everything avoids it. Like, no one knows why. And then the Worm Gods. They're still out there. They're still doing their thing. We could potentially help the Fallen retake Reese, and then resettle everything. Like, there are a lot of loose plot threads. I don't think they'll run out of story anytime soon. It's just about making it compelling.
Yeah, I mean, Mara in general, she is, I would imagine we'll see more of her in Final Shape, but for someone so powerful and interesting, definitely haven't seen much from the old Queen. But yeah, they did say very much so the Vex is looking, the future is Vex. And they said, yeah, when it concludes, they'll be in a position to do more stuff, and they're kind of waiting for a winner. So that did seem pretty interesting.